playing in the NFL may have a cool or tough guy demeanor, but I promise you there is nothing cool about concussions. Concussions have been an underlying issue in the NFL for as long as the league has existed, but the problem is the NFL is now taking measures, but so much time has elapsed since, you know, people have been affected by this. And just because they are doing certain measures now does not mean they are doing enough. And I believe the NFL needs to do more, and this needs to really become the biggest priority of the NFL. Honestly, because concussions are one of the scariest things that can ever happen to an athlete because of the detrimental impacts it has on your brain and your whole life down the road. Because I've witnessed firsthand personal friends who have gone through concussions, and already at a young age their mind is already being affected. At a larger scale, NFL players have been affected by a disease called CTE, which stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And this such disease has caused endless traumatic injuries and just terrible brain damage, and ultimately leads to suicide of many NFL players. And almost every single player that has been checked for CTE following their death has been confirmed of it. So it is a very pressing issue, and one that the NFL tried to cover up themselves but did not get away with. My research question, though, is what is the NFL doing to protect their players, and what else can they do to assure that all of their players will be protected and be safe while playing this game? My side of the argument, in whole, is on the side of player safety and development of creating technology to protect players from sustaining head injuries. The NFL is no longer entitled to cover up the evidence that they happened to get away with in the past. People are finally starting to catch up on the fact that the NFL is very dangerous, and that the players are truly at risk every time they take the field. The future of their own health is the pressing issue, and what everyone needs to keep their eyes glued to. My personal statement is that if the NFL does not make adjustments in player safety, there will be no such thing as the NFL come 30 years or so down the road, and that is my guarantee to you. The history of CTE started not too long ago, and only stretches all the way back to 2002 when they discovered exactly what CTE was. And this has all go to the credit of Dr. Bennett Amalu. In a CNN report, I read Dr. Amalu, a forensic pathologist and co-founder of the Brain Injury Research Institute, identifies chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, in the brain of former Pittsburgh Steelers center Mike Webster, who committed suicide. Amalu is the first to identify CTE in American football players. Dr. Amalu's extensive research led to groundbreaking discovery in which was all but unknown and disregarded previously by the NFL. Former players were going mentally insane with no official diagnosis, and it was shrugged off with no worries. Amalu had to dig deep down to discover the truth of what was happening and to reveal to the world. Since CTE has been discovered, it has been found in almost every deceased NFL player brains. According to the Huffington Post, 87 out of 92 former NFL players who donated their brains to be studied tested positively for CTE. That is over 90% of those NFL players. And that is just an astonishing number to look at. Almost every single person who has played in the NFL has developed CTE later on in their life. A very sad thing about these specific findings is that there is no test to be possibly done while alive to determine CTE. The only thing that can be known is the symptoms, which were simply described in an article written by protectthebrain.org by stating, some of the most common include loss of memory, difficult controlling impulsive or erratic behavior, impaired judgment, behavioral disturbances including aggressive and depression, difficult with balance, and a gradual onset of dementia. That is exactly what is the biggest gap in the research is the fact that you can't diagnose, you know, as a player or a person in general having CTE until they are dead. I mean, it is so scary that people who are living with CTE are going through these mentally insane issues, are just have no diagnosis while alive. And, in the past, it was just, deemed, oh, that person is okay. We did the CAT scans, the brain check. There's nothing wrong with these patients. When in reality, they are very mentally ill. And, that is just the biggest gap in research and what needs to be done. And, that is what I want to look at. What can they do to discover, you know, how someone has CTE? And I think, the best way, in my opinion, is the fact that, just watching people, especially post NFL players, watching their symptoms and, getting them to doctors and helping them find ways to diagnose these symptoms. All the common public can infer is to when someone might have CTE is, these at known symptoms. There's not much we can do. But it is not officially known until death whether or not it is truly affecting their brain as a disease. So, with all of this information, unfortunately, an underlying possibility is risk of the future of the NFL. And people have said the league could disappear in the next 30 to 40 years. This has already been starting to show right away with the decreasing rates from youth football leagues. Pop Warner Football is the largest youth football league in America and claims that 60 to 70% of NFL players played in this such youth league. An ESPN's article by Steve Fanaru, he states this statistic. Pop Warner saw participation drop 9.5% between 2010 and 2012, a sign that concussion crisis that began in the NFL is having a dramatic impact at the lowest rungs of the sport. This is a staggering decrease in participation for youth programs, and if these rates are to continue, there's little to no hope at all for the state of football and the NFL. I looked into what the league is doing to prevent this and prevent further such head injury. The NFL has began to make significant improvements, not only in the protocol of the helmets, but also in the rules of the game. One huge rule that they have implemented since, the discoverings of CTE, with the outbreak of players suing the NFL and, coming forward saying they're mentally insane or their family saying their death was caused from playing football. So, it has led to a specific rule, and I took this from the NFL article in which they state the reworded rules prohibit a player from launching himself off the ground and using his helmet to strike a player in a defenseless posture in the head or neck. The old rule only applied to receivers getting hit, but now it will apply to everyone. Obviously, this is a significant rule that they needed to implement to protect, players' heads and to reduce the amount of concussions and obviously, protect them from getting CTE down the road, because that is the underlying factor in what needs to be changed, and that is a huge thing that they have done so far. Obviously, they need to implement it each game and make sure that there are no lapses in it and no loopholes around it. So that is the most important thing to protect the players' heads. Obviously, my stance on the situation is that we need to make sure these improvements continue and, that we learn from the past what has happened, and we need to make sure that we prevent, any further, deaths from playing football, because this is a very important sport to America, obviously, for many reasons, for revenue, for leisure time, for, it's one of America's pastimes, but it will not continue if we continue to put people in body bags, from playing the sport. And that is just uncalled for. So, that is my stance here. And, what it came from, my personal connection to this, not only have I played sports my whole life, I was in a car crash last year and, I suffered a concussion and, the personal symptoms I went through, I mean, obviously could not have been as severe as, playing in the NFL, going head to head with, 250-pound plus men, grown men, who are just absolutely giant. Obviously mine was a little less stressful, and um, obviously it still had, detrimental effects on my own self. Impaired sight,